All right, what's going on Facebook, we are live. It is another Keep It Real Fridays. It is 7 o'clock and we are excited to jump in. Happy New Year to everybody that will jump on with us and those who will watch us on a replay. So for those who don't know me, my name is Thomas Brackeen. And this is Keep It Real Fridays. And so for those of you who may not know what Keep It Real Fridays is, Keep It Real Fridays started a little bit about 15 years ago. And it started as a youth and young adult service that was provided as an alternative for young people to come express their relationship with God, the gifts and talents to be able to express in their own way. Many who came from traditional church backgrounds where there was not much to do but be on the usher board or be in the youth choir, but not much else. So Keep It Real Fridays was designed as a platform for young people to express themselves in their own way. And so we will have services with gospel rap, mime, dance, poetry, and spoken word, different genres of, gospel music. And just youth and young adults will come together and just be able to just enjoy themselves. And we started out with 7 young people, and throughout the 15 years, we've seen as many as 300 young people come together and worship on a Friday night. And of course, over this past year, we've had to switch things, and we haven't been able to meet in the physical space, but we are now kind of just having conversations virtually on different topics that pertain to youth, that pertain to young adults. And so we've had 11 episodes from last year that you can certainly go back and check out our website, keepitrealfridays.com, or go on YouTube and you can Google some of the previous episodes of different topics that we've discussed. And so we're excited that this year we're going to continue these conversations with different people from the DC area and beyond. And so you'll hear from a lot of my colleagues and friends from around the world. And I have my good friend from the good NYC on tonight, and I'll introduce her in just a moment. And so in that, if you know a young person that should be highlighted on Keep It Real Fridays, we ask that you, send me a message. If you know a young person that's an entrepreneur or that's doing great things in the community or doing great things in the church, we would like to highlight them on a Friday night. So feel free to send them my way. But for right now, we are going to get started with this conversation. Again, I have one of my good friends from New York City, LenMarie Pascall, that's here with me. I'm gonna let her introduce herself in her own way, but I always have to introduce the connection of those who are joining us. And before I introduce her, I just want to encourage those who are logged in, feel free to use the comments to participate in the conversation, or if you have a question or something that just hits, just go ahead and we'll highlight that. And we want you to join in on a conversation with me and LenMarie. But Len, my good friend, that rhymes. Yes, I got bars tonight. But Len, my friend from New York City, we connected a few years back at Urban Youth Workers. Shout out to Tommy Nixon, Larry Acosta, and all the good Urban Youth Workers Institute individuals and folks from across the country. And for those of you who don't know about Urban Youth Workers is an organization that used to have this national youth conference in Cali every year. They weren't able to have it last year because of the pandemic, but literally would meet every May, and just about 1,000 or more youth workers would come together across the country. And it was just like a huge family reunion. And I got introduced to Len because I was actually in the Urban Youth Workers Institute 90 degree certification program. And I was in the New York City cohort. And for those who don't know my crazy story, I used to go from DC once a month, catch the bus, 4.5 hours, go hang around the city, and then go to class at night, leave class at 9:30, head to the bus station, get on a bus, ride overnight back to DC, and then go to work. and sleep on the bus. But I got introduced to this awesome organization and some awesome friends from New York City. And, we traveled together to Urban Youth Workers Conference. And then they said, oh, we got this friend Lynn coming. They are part of the new cohort. And I got to meet Lynn, and we've just become good friends since. So here's my friend Lynn from New York City. She's going to tell us a little bit about just herself, but that's my story about Lynn. But Lynn, tell us about you, your ministry, just what God is doing in your life.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Like he said, it's Len. I know you see LenMarie down there, but I don't think anyone calls me LenMarie, so Len is fine. So I used to be a youth pastor in Queens, New York, until August of this year. I transitioned and transferred to a seminary in New Jersey. So now I live in New Jersey temporarily. I'm still a New Yorker. But my passions, and I still do, is working with kids in the juvenile justice system, uh, gathering people, bringing people together, kind of like what you do, Tommy. I think that's definitely a passion of yours, even virtually. I've been to one of your virtual gatherings. Um, so yeah, gathering people, soul care, and I think one of the big things for me is women in leadership. So
Awesome. So tonight, for those of you who don't know, we're going to be talking about giving youth a second chance, and we're going to talk about serving in juvenile justice and talking to Lynn about some of her experiences. So that's not really a familiar ministry for most. When we talk about church and when we talk about youth ministry, Lynn, we talk about having services
pizza.
and pizza games,
Yeah.
bringing them together, giving them prizes and things of that nature. But we often don't talk about that juvenile justice is an aspect of youth ministry that we should not ignore. So I wanted to kind of ask you, how did you get into the work of juvenile justice, and what fuels your passion for doing this work?
So sorry.
Don't worry about it.
We're surprising my friend. She just walked in. Sorry about that. Yeah.
It's all good.
So I actually got arrested when I was 17. It was actually the night before my 18th birthday. So I got arrested. I turned 18 in a holding cell. And I remember what that felt like. It was crazy scary. I remember going to court and all of that stuff. Um, but I remember leaving that time and just having my dad there to bail me out, one, to come to court with me. I noticed that just in in court, that wasn't a common thing. Like a lot of youth would be there without their parents, without their family members. So when I got to college, I decided and I also felt like I think God was kind of leading me to that in college. So I started off in business and I just transitioned into criminology. So it started off with me trying to figure out why people commit crimes. Like, how did I get arrested? Why did this happen? Um, and then it kind of just morphed into, while I was in college, I had a friend that got arrested. I would go visit him in Rikers every other week. I was going up to Rikers with my little self, visiting him. And then eventually kind of morphed into like, well, how can I help? How can I help in a way that is tangible, in a way that would help stop recidivism? And that's really the passion that I have when it comes to juvenile justice, is ending this cycle. Um, so yeah, so that was kind of like a passion that I just had. And I think I had it and kind of forgot about it almost, or I had it and wasn't really doing anything actively. It was like if I knew someone that got arrested, I'll try to visit them or write to them, something like that. Until one day I worked in finance for 5 years, and I was sitting down at a youth pastors gathering, youth leader gathering, and this guy, this white man, came and he sat on our table and he's like, "What do you want to do in 5 years?" And I'm like, "Come on, bro! Like we supposed to be here to relax. Like this. We ain't talking about 5-year plans." So my friend, who's super sweet, started talking to him about what her 5-year plan is. So I was like, I'm not answering this dude. Like she could talk, they could, they could converse. And then he looked to me and he said, "What about you? What is your 5-year plan?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What is your 5-year plan?" And I told him, And I said, well, I work for this hospital, blah, 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 I do it, blah, blah, blah. I said, but I've always wanted to, and it was crazy because I hadn't told anyone this from since college. I was like, I've always wanted to start a nonprofit where young people can come to that were previously incarcerated, and they can kind of, I think I told him, I was like, I want to help them rehabilitate. And he was like, well, then you need to talk to me because I'm the like national director of juvenile justice for Youth for Christ. And I was like, what? I have some of that, but I got, do you, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. It disconnected. Okay. Are we back?
Yeah, I think it's breaking up a little bit. Can you hear me, Len?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I think it's breaking
I
up a
can hear
little
you
bit.
now.
Okay, cool. So in that, Len, and as we get in a connection together, one of the things that you talked about, and it's
I was just
about our
about to text you.
Can you hear me
Okay.
now? Can you hear me
Yeah.
now? Okay, cool. All right.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I can hear you.
one of the things that you talked about, you talked about that moment where you got locked up and your father was there to come bail you out, but you noticed that there were other young people there that didn't have that same type of support. I remember a story, not necessarily in the same sense, but I remember I have a friend who got locked up at a younger age, probably about 19 or 20. Actually, it was a good friend of mine. Actually, he just recently got released about a year and a half ago. And, for some reason at that time, because me and him, we grew up together. And I was just like, man, I gotta reach out to him. Like,
Yeah.
I went on a mission to find out where he was locked up, and I had the help of about 2 or 3 adults to try to help me try to figure out how to locate him. And finally, when I got in contact with him, maybe a year or two in, I started writing letters, and he was just like, "Oh my gosh, like I'm so grateful that you wrote me a letter." Like, all the people that I used to run with, like I haven't heard from anybody. And that just makes me think about how, like, so many, like you said, don't have that support. And that support is needed, and how, often you can go into that space of isolation, once you maybe made a decision that you chose to make, or, you were just around the wrong people, and sometimes that support is lost. So I want to thank you for highlighting that. Next thing I want to kind of ask you, Lynn, can you tell us a story about one of your youth that you have worked with, kind of through this juvenile justice journey, that has made a great impact in your life doing this work?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Lynn?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Lynn? Can you hear me, Lynn? I think our connection.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's going in and out. I'm not sure if you heard my last question, Lynn. Okay, we're going to try to re-add Lynn back to the stream. But going back into this juvenile justice piece, while we try to get Lynn back online. One of the things that, I think it's important as we talk about juvenile justice and try to make sure that we're giving young people a second chance, we have to make sure that we give them the opportunity to be able to re-engage back in the community. And often that our young people, when they get, when they make that, maybe that bad decision, or maybe have chosen to go the wrong way, not necessarily all the time, we got to try to continue to walk that journey with them as much as possible. I think, especially when we talk about youth ministry, and this is not one of those, again, ministries that's not always familiar or popular as it pertains to being in youth ministry, that sometimes we have to think about doing youth ministry in a different way, and that there's another youth population that we need to reach, and that we need to focus on. And that oftentimes these are the forgotten youth, or these are the youth that we say often that we don't want to deal with, or we don't have time, because there's a risk that we take. There's a vulnerability. There's a vulnerability to rejection, because oftentimes they may not want to hear from us. They may not want what we have to offer. They might not want to hear the gospel. But one of the things that I've learned in doing youth ministry is that you got to make sure that you're consistent, and that even when you come across youth that have been incarcerated, that we ought not to put labels on them, and that we strive to have the same type of relationship with these young people, just like the young people at our church. And sometimes we fall into mistakes sometimes. That we're with our young people, that sometimes we try to separate our church young people from those who may have gone through the prison system. So we got Lynn back now. I know we had a little bit of connectivity issues, but I was just talking about how it's important to establish those relationships with our young people, as it pertains to not separating them from our kids, as it pertains to youth ministry, that this is a population that we ought to think about ministering to and going beyond our comfort zone. But the question I wanted to get into with you was, can you tell us a story about one of your youth that had a great impact on your life doing this work?
Yeah, actually, a youth that I'm still working with her now. She completely changed, I think, even my vision of what I want ministry to look like post seminary. So I meet this girl, and she's just like vibrant. Usually when you go into so you go into any facility in New York, there's like 10 times more men or young boys or young men, youth, male youth than female. So I go into the female hall, they call it, or where they stay, and there's probably like 5 girls. And this one girl, I guess I'll call her Stacy, right? Let's call her Stacy. So Stacy's there, and all the other girls are timid, but she's like bold. You could tell she's running things. She's like the OG in the hall. She's not that big in size, right? But she's just like the one. So I get to know this girl, and her story, I think, is really what did it for me. So she still she lives with her mom. Her mom couldn't handle her, I guess. She goes to live with her dad. She gets abused at her dad's house. So she has to go back with her mom. Her mom decides she's not, she doesn't want to deal with her. So her mom gives her up. And there's more layers to it, because I'm close friends with her mom now and everything like that. So this goes in the foster system, and every home she goes to, she runs away because she doesn't want to be in foster. She wants to be, at home. So anyway, she gets in trouble. She gets arrested. So she's in the detention center. And every time she gets to court, and I would go to court with her, right? Every time she gets to court, they'll put her into a program. She doesn't want to be in a program, so she'll run from the program. She'll get rearrested. She'll end up in detention. So I think if you're looking at her story, you're like, she doesn't want to change. You'll think this girl doesn't want to change. Stacy is, if you hear them talk about how the staff in the detention centers, they'll be like, who's Stacy? She'll be back here in 2 weeks. Like, that's how, everybody's like, yeah, she's going to be back. When she comes back, they're not shocked. She fights when she's in there, things like that. But one day we got to do a Bible study, and we were reading, I can't remember which chapter from John, but we were reading John, and we were having a really good conversation, and their time was running up. So one of the girls was like, please, can we pray? Because I don't want you to leave and we not pray. So I was like, okay, cool. So I looked to Stacy and I said, Stacy, do you want to pray for us today? And she was like, she's a little apprehensive. She's like, okay. So she starts to pray, and you can tell the whole room just shifted as she's praying. And she says, God, I pray that you remove all the bad in us and give us your spirit. I didn't teach them that, right? This is just coming from like wherever. And she starts to cry, and she's like, we don't want to be bad, God. She's like she said something like, we don't want the devil to control us. Like, we don't. And I'm like, it was just mind blowing to me. And everyone now starts to cry. Even the staff, like the CEOs, they start to cry. I'm crying. Everybody's crying because you can just see her heart, like her heart is pouring out in this prayer. And I think with youth like that, right, where their actions say one thing, but when you actually hear their heart, right, you hear something else. I think it completely does something. For me, what it said for me was like, yeah, I have to fight with this girl because she wants to change. She wants a different life. I have to fight with her. So yeah, that's something that I always remember that moment. It was just a beautiful moment.
Wow. Well, when you said that, and often I think we have misconceptions of youth that have been incarcerated. And going back to what you said, it's that story. And we really have to take the time to listen to that story, because a lot of times we will, and I want to ask you about these misconceptions in a moment, but a lot of times we just like, oh, they're bad kids, or, whatever, we have in our mind, but we never sit down to listen to the stories. Can you kind of talk about some of the misconceptions that we have before we listen to their actual story that we might go around in our head?
Yeah, I think a big one is that when you look at the recidivism rate, especially in New York, right? What you think about is that these kids, they just like to give trouble. Like you were locked up for a year and then you got out and got into trouble again. Like, you obviously like to be in jail. Like, you obviously, like, there's no changing you. People say things like, if you were arrested under 17, chances are you're going to be an adult offender. They teach you this in school. This is like a thing, right? So I think the idea is that they're just bad kids and something went wrong when they were younger, or they're in gangs. That's the biggest thing. When the reality is, a lot of these kids really join gangs when they get into the detention center because they want to be cool or they want to belong to a group. So they'll jack like a certain gang. I've gone to court with a lot of these kids, and sometimes I meet their parents and I'm like, oh, you actually come from a home with like a mother and a father, or you come from a home with a mom working or something like that. You just think things. The misconception is that they come from bad neighborhoods, all of them. They come from bad homes, all of them. And that does exist. Or that they're just bad kids. They're just bad. And the reality is, a lot of them, if you really listen to their stories, there are traumatic events that happen that make them make the decisions that led them to the decisions that they've made. Or it's just they messed up. Like, they just messed up one time or the other. So, yeah, I think the biggest misconception is that that's just how they are. And they choose that. They choose deviance over a normal life.
And sometimes, in what you just said, sometimes that we think that they choose deviance over a normal life, but we don't recognize that sometimes their normal life is that if any of the young people are like some of the ones that we work with in the DC area, and our close connection, Ray Nelson, will tell you that some of these kids are haven't ate all day, or some of these kids are operating in a sense of survival. If they go outside and walk down the street, then that thought is, I might get shot.
Right.
When we got shot last week. So a lot of this is sometimes behavior of survival. A lot of them are coming from, suffering through the gentrification that's happening in the DC area. And, they're coming from low income or bottom income homes. And we're thinking like you said, that they're choosing this because this is what I want to do. But sometimes it's often their environment that they're coming from.
Yeah. I mean, just look at Stacy, right? Stacy gets out, or she leaves the program that she was put into, whichever one. And her mom doesn't have custody of her anymore. Her dad, she can't go there because there's an abuse case in that home, not from him, but from whoever is in that home. So she has nowhere to go, right? Stacy is going to steal, right? She's going to steal to get food, to get things that she wants, to get clothes, whatever. She's going to steal time and time again. Like, that's just what she's going to do because she has nowhere to stay. Where does she stay? They stay, literally, young girls stay in abandoned houses. You want to find any of them, just find one, you'll find the rest of them. Right? In abandoned houses. There was one instance where I found them. I found some of the girls, or I found out they were staying in a house with a prostitute. You know what I mean? So these are all illegal things. So yeah, if they get caught, they would get arrested again. But they got arrested because when you let them out of the detention center, you didn't leave them in good hands. You didn't put them in a safe home. You didn't give them job opportunities. You know what I mean? Like, these are the things that they need to survive when they get out. These are the things that will prevent recidivism. But if you send them right back into their old, into the hood or nowhere in Stacy's case, then yeah, they are gonna reoffend.
So you're just making this conversation easy, because the next question I was going to ask you was, what are the things that we need to do to empower them, once they've been incarcerated, once they've been released? You talked about resources. I mean, what is it, are those things that we need to think about differently as a church, as a community? What are things that we can begin to do to kind of help this population get back on their feet?
Yeah, so again, I'll just keep using Stacy. Stacy's what the system in New York calls a crossover youth, because she's foster care and she's in the juvenile justice system, right? So on both ends, it's she's just like in the system. And those are like the hardest kids to place into a home. And you find that a lot. A lot of the youth that I work with, they have nowhere to go when they get out. And I think if the church can really talk more about foster care and how important it is. I know that in a lot of Christian circles, they don't like that because they're like, oh, I can't have somebody in my house, things like that. But that's what God said, right? When I was homeless, either you let me in or you didn't let me in. When I was hungry, either you fed me or you didn't feed me. And I think that's a big deal. Like, housing for when they come out is huge. I think another thing that the church can really do is jobs. And that's just young Black men especially, right? Jobs is big. When you come out of prison, there is this statistic, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's something like, if they don't find a job within like the first 2 weeks, if they don't find employment within the first 2 weeks of release, they are headed right back. That's what they say, right? They are headed right back into the system. So, and I think as Christians, sometimes we're like, oh, well, we can't do this big grand thing. But how many business owners do we have in our churches? Come on, right? Restaurants, whatever. How many business owners do we have in our churches that can literally make it a point to say, I am going to hire former incarcerated men and women, youth, right? And then I think finally, so I would say housing, jobs, and they're always hungry. They're hungry when they come out. I get text messages about food all the time. Can you send me? Can you buy me something to eat? Can you get me some Uber Eats? I remember taking some girls out, and we went to KFC. We were in the KFC drive-thru. So I'm thinking like, let me get them a sufficient meal, and they were like, we don't want you to spend so much money. Like, whatever you can afford is good. Like, they were looking at the dollar menu. And for me, that shows that they're not trying to get over on me. They're just really hungry. So they're like, we'll take anything. Literally, they were saying, we'll take anything. Like, we don't want to be a bother, but we're hungry and we'll take anything. So I think that's another thing. Any resources. I know that there's a church out here called C3. They work with Youth for Christ a lot in providing meals for formerly incarcerated kids. And even if you have like odds and end jobs to do around the house, things like that, connect with people like Youth for Christ or whoever else is working with that population and hire these kids to do it. So for me, those are just practical things that I see. The bigger thing would be advocacy. The bigger thing would be, getting involved with these organizations, going into the detention centers, mentoring, all that type of stuff. But I think the practical things that mother whoever at the church can do, and sister whoever at the church, brother whoever at the church can do, I would say those things.
Okay. I want to ask you a question, and it's kind of before we started to live, we kind of started to talk about this before we started. We talked about the importance of not looking at those who have been previously incarcerated, not looking at them as the other kids. Do you suggest any way for one that's been a youth pastor at your church and one that works in juvenile justice? Because often, and as we talked about a little while ago, sometimes and this is Keep It Real Friday, so I'm gonna be real. Sometimes we will often go into our churches. We're okay with giving the resources. We're okay with giving the gift cards. We're okay with giving them food. We're okay with how can we find some resources so I don't have to necessarily work hands on. But is there a way that we kind of keep them separated from the rest of our kids? Because our kids, they are Bible believing, scripture reading kids, and we can't possibly integrate our kids with those who may have had some problems with the system, and sometimes often those kids get isolated.
Yeah.
Can you maybe speak of ways that maybe you've had to try to integrate or try to break, kind of break the stigma or break the stereotype in a way?
Yeah, I think it's so hard. It's so hard when you talked about your church being 182 years. My church is 102 or 103, something like that, where things have just been done a certain way. Like these are the kids that were raised in the church and they participate in the quizzing ministry or the choir ministry or the this ministry. But then you bring kids off the street who participate in like weed ministry, like I mean, there's been so many Fridays where I'm like, y'all, really, you had to do that before you came here, and you didn't even try to hide the smell before you walked in the building. So but yeah, the question was some of the challenges that I've had. I mean, for me, I would just I would start talking to parents. I was telling you before that I lost a whole generation of youth that could have been a part of our youth ministry because we had kids that weren't from the church in there, right? So what I would do is I started to do things on an individual basis. That was the first thing, was go to parents who, their kids, because the kids were coming to me like, yo, can I come to youth group? And I'd be like, I want you to come to youth group, but your mom is not going to let you. I would go to parents and they'll say things to me like, no, my kids are easily influenced, so I don't want them to be around that. And a lot of times they haven't even been around these kids. They just know that they're not from the church. So yeah, I would have those difficult conversations. Sometimes they would send their kids. I had this one lady that she did send her daughter a couple times, and that was cool. But the next thing I did was we started to record everything. Like everything that we did on Friday nights, we recorded it and we played it on Sunday mornings. So, I mean, this is like when all the challenges was coming out. Remember that challenge where you would just stay still? What challenge? Mannequin challenge?
Yeah.
We did that. Everything that was hot and new, we just did it. And we would put it out there on Sundays. So then the kids now, the church kids, is like, yo, that's hot. We want to go. And that's like peer pressure, like not peer pressure, but pressure for their parents as their parents in church like this. And we put retreats. The retreats we were going on with these kids that did not come from Christian homes, crying, like accepting Christ into their lives. And we would have reflection videos after retreats with them saying like, man, I came here and I met God. And yeah, because, the Bible talks about how powerful testimonies are. So that's what we did. we just started showing how lit it was and how the word was really being, I think they thought that the word wasn't being preached. I think they thought that we weren't sharing the gospel. I don't know, but we just had to show them real quick. And I think that helped a lot. That helped a lot because it gave them a lot of pressure. But it also showed them that it's like, it's a good environment for church kids and non-church. It's just a good environment for youth. It's a youth group, right? Like, so. And quite frankly, if I might add, it was the church kids that gave us the most trouble. It was always the church kids.
You better preach, Len.
Listen. I took my kids to a camp and they got caught. There's a big camp with like mad churches. And my kids were in the woods smoking weed, right? And so they're like, you know, I get called out on it. Your kids was in the whatever. And I'm like, oh, literally, and God forgive me. I was like, oh, it's so-and-so, right? A kid that wasn't from church. And they were like, no, actually, it was this one. The one that was born and raised in the church was the one that bought everything, supplied everything. I was like, yeah. So.
Lord, let me tell you how many retreats I've been on with just what you just said. And it's the church kids that are the ones that are making the trouble. I swear, you preaching the gospel right now, Lynn. I want to ask you this because I want you to help a youth leader right now. I want you to help somebody. Can you say something about, you know, that young person that comes in the door that is smelling like weed? Many of us don't know how to handle that situation. Of how do we bring this person into youth group? How do we address it? Because you may have some instances, and you know, depending on how people handle the situation, like, no, you smell like weed, you got to go. Yeah. You know, do you think there's a you know, and not that there's a perfect way to handle the situation, but you know, is there a good way that you think is to handle that situation, or how you address, or how you even engage, or maybe stuff you've learned from that?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many lessons just from that. I think so UIWI 90 degrees. I remember before I started experiencing it, before it started happening in my youth group. I remember a young lady brought it up and she was like, I told him he had to go. He knew better than that. And I remember just feeling like, I don't know. Like, I just remember not feeling settled. But anyway, when it happened to me, I think the biggest thing for me was letting them know that I know, right? Because I think a lot of times they think they're so slick with it. So I think I always bring that awareness, like, oh, you're high. And they be like, how'd you know? I mean, come on, like, you smell like weed. What do you mean? So I think that's usually the first thing. I don't think punishing someone for coming to youth group high is helpful. One, they're high, and chances are after it's all done, they may or may not remember everything that the whole speech you gave them. They may or may not remember. But I do talk to them. I do follow up after. I do express, even when they're there, I express, depending on especially who it is, to my church kids, I express my disappointment, right? I always go there first because it is disappointment. It's not really anger. I express that. And I follow up when they're sober and I have conversation with them. However, I have had times where youth have come to my youth group high and gotten into fights. I should say it happened one time. And that time I didn't catch it before, but I did notice that they were like two of them were getting at each other, and they had to go because they were distracting everyone else. So I think it's a case-by-case basis. And I think we just have to be wise in what we communicate to people. And I think love first all the time. Yes, we have to see them first. Exactly. I'm always, man, I could tell you I'm really disappointed, but I'm not gonna ignore you, for the whole night. Like, I think sometimes, a lot of us as youth pastors, youth leaders, sometimes can be passive aggressive. We ignore them because they didn't do something we wanted them to do. But for me, it's all love. But I would be honest and upfront with you. I would say one thing though. I did have a young leader in training that he was older than them, and he also came high one day. And I found out that he took the younger ones to get the weed. And I did sit him down when he was sober. I sat him down and told him that he can no longer be a leader. because what he did was illegal. And if any of the parents found out that I had a leader taking kids to get weed, the whole church was going to be in trouble. So I had to do that, but still offered mentorship for him and discipleship for him if he was willing to take the course. So it's a lot of hard decisions. And every situation is different. Every youth is different. So you deal with them differently.
Yeah, yeah. I've literally had kids come to basketball practice. As many people know, I coach basketball, smelling like a whole pound. And, you gotta really think about the decision that you're about to make. Am I going to kick this kid out of practice and send him back into the environment that he just came from?
Listen.
Or am I going to provide a safe space for this individual to try to help change his life? Mm-hmm. And what is more important, that, I don't want this weed smell in my gym, or trying to make a difference in his life?
Yeah.
And there has been times, like you said, that, sometimes that kid may come problematic. And sometimes, I have to deal with that. And maybe sometimes, either, I got to raise my voice, or I got to put him out of practice.
Yeah.
But even in that, never stop loving the kids, and sometimes, in that, having to put them out of practice because they've gotten in a fight, sometimes you want to be like, look, I don't want you back. I'm probably the coach that has probably given a second, third, fourth chance, even when I didn't want to. But it's important because they've been kicked out in so many environments, so many spaces, and then you become the next one that kicked them out. And so it's like somebody has to try to sow something into this child. So, and I remember one specific kid, he'll come smelling like, Black and Miles of weed every week. But and I would take him home. I would even pick him up, he'd get in my car, smell like that. And half the time I wouldn't say nothing. Because
I would feed them, actually.
Yeah.
I would feed them, because that would help them with their, they get the munchies. I'm like, go downstairs in the kitchen and get something to eat, and go spray yourself. Go in the bathroom and spray yourself.
But the reality, there was something about what I was doing that they kept coming back to practice. Mm-hmm. So even in their getting high before practice, Coach Thomas, I still need you to come pick me up.
Yeah.
Coach Thomas, I need to get to the game. So, sometimes we got to pick and choose our battles. And, like you said, different situations with different kids. My good friend O'Brien Wimbish said, I wish you were my youth leader. He was talking about you, Len. O'Brien was a little menace when he was 16, as I found out a couple weeks ago when he was one of our guests on Keep It Real. And then LeVar, another good youth pastor in the DC area, says there's so much ministry in the dirty moments.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And there's so much dirty moments. I mean, there was so much dirty moments with Jesus, right? So why would we think that we would have a perfect youth ministry? Why would we think that it's only for saved kids? Like, why would we think that when Jesus wasn't doing that? When his youth ministry included people like Judas and Peter. You know what I mean? It's like, we can't have all Johns. We just can't.
Yeah, we like safe youth ministry. O'Brien said, he know about the munchies.
Yeah, the munchies are real, man. So
he said he would have rated your, I think he meant rated your fridge, Lynn.
He would have raised what?
He would have rated your fridge. He would have rated your fridge if you were offering snacks to feed. So
yeah, we try to feed them when they come in high. They can focus better, I think, when they eat after they're high. So.
Mm-hmm. So, as we prepare to wrap up this conversation, this has been a great talk about how we can kind of, give youth that second chance that they deserve. And, sometimes they need a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, as many chances, because as we know, as much as dirt as we've done, Jesus continues to give us chance after chance after chance. So we all go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, I want to say too, like, when we talk about second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chances, we're talking about this work is really for the long haul, right? Maybe I'm not serving as a leader of that youth group anymore, but I'm still in touch with those youth, and this work is not a position-based work, right? It's a relational thing. So I think it's a lifetime thing. I really do believe it's a lifetime thing because yeah, they may have, they may be saved, but they still need guidance because they're still gonna mess up in life, right? Whether it's spiritually, at work, in relationships, you know what I mean? I'm giving relationship advice all the time to my youth, like things like that. So we have to be in it for the long haul. Ministry with youth especially is not an overnight thing. We're not going to see results overnight, right? You don't take a high schooler and put them in the OR in you know what I mean, and ask them to do surgery. They have to go to school. There's like a process, and it's the same thing with anything, any area of their life as they develop. It's a process. So we have to be there for the long haul. So when we talk about giving you second chances, know that you're signing up for something. It's not a 2-year, oh no, I'm gonna do this for a year and see what God does. Like, and they don't need someone coming in and out of their lives too, right? So just be prepared for the long haul. Yeah.
LeVar says it's not positional but relational.
Yes.
Whew, Lord. It makes me think about because sometimes I think the church has brainwashed us, and when I say this, because I know my good church friends like LeVar and Keisha and O'Brien, and I know Christian Belton was on. I see Duran was on. I love the church, but sometimes we get caught up in going back to just elaborate on what LeVar was saying about the not positional but relational. But we got to stop looking at youth ministry as we're trying to build these kingdoms of youth ministry. And sometimes we get fascinated with, how many people are in your youth group? You got 50 kids, you got 100 kids, you got 200 kids. And we get so caught up in how many kids we got coming to youth group. One of the questions that I hear often, and especially now, even in this pandemic, how many kids you got coming to your virtual stuff? How many kids you got? How many kids? And sometimes, is it not about that one child? Is it not about that relationship building? And statistics say, and you just talked about it, Lynn. Statistics say that it takes a year and a half for a youth leader to develop a relationship with a young person. But if we in and out in a year and a half and 2 years, that we haven't even touched the surface on this work. And so I just want to say thank you for the great work that you've been doing, that you have done, and that you will continue to do, Lynn. I'm going to ask you just this last thought, just not even last thought, but I know you do other things in ministry that you've talked about. You talked about the areas of women in leadership and about soul care. I want you to just kind of talk about that work so people can kind of get to know you and what you do, and those who may want to follow you on IG and just follow the work that you're doing.
Yeah, no, cool. So I'm a part of a denomination called Church of the Nazarene where women are ordained. So I've been a part of that all my life. So I always saw women pastors and women leaders. So I never knew that I never knew it was a thing until I came across someone that was like, you're doing the wrong thing, like you're sinning. And I was like, what are you talking about? So I don't know, years later after I did, I studied and things like that, I started a podcast called Yes, Women Lead. And it's not a theological debate or anything like that, but it's more to encourage women that feel the call upon their lives to lead, but are in spaces where they're not affirmed. Like I said before, when I got incarcerated, when I was arrested, I had support, right? And it's the same thing now. When I first said, I feel like God is calling me to be a pastor, to preach, to whatever, I was affirmed. And it's just a beautiful thing to be in spaces like that. So I just want to exist to help women who have that call on their lives, do it. And yes, you can. Some of the youth that I'm closest to are young men, and there has never been anything inappropriate, right? I'm sometimes older sister or mom or whatever. God forbid. I'm too young to be mom, but they be tripping. But I'm older sister, auntie, or whatever. and there's nothing inappropriate. So yes, you can lead young men. Yes, you can have, you know, it's whatever. You know where I'm coming from with this. I'm not sure about what your denomination or your background says, but I feel strongly about affirming women who feel called. I'm not saying to every woman, yes, come, do it just because you can. If you feel like deep down God is calling you, but you know you're not supported, like I want to have a conversation with you. So that's kind of that part of it. And a couple of years ago, I read a book called Soul Care by Dr. Rob Reimer, and I took his class, and it was really transformational for me. So I've been using that book just within my church and teaching those classes. But I love to talk about the topic of rest and soul care and things like that. So in several spaces, I've had the opportunity to do that. So that's something that has been really close to my heart.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful for this conversation. For those of you, you know, make sure you log in next week. We're going to have my good friend who was actually in the comments, LeVar Jones, is going to be on talking about his new organization called Project Good Men, where we'll be talking about how to empower our young Black kings. And we'll be having that conversation next week. So y'all tune in next week at 7 o'clock at the same time. Follow us at KIR Fridays on all platforms. Len, I can't wait to when this pandemic is over for me to get back to New York. Let me tell y'all, one of the last times where I was able to get to New York a while back to connect with, I think I was in New York for work, and I was connecting with my NYC, I was trying to connect with my NYC fam. And I was able to connect with Lynn, and she, you know, I'm a picky eater. You know, I everything is pretty plain Jane to me. Lynn told me, no, we are going to the ramen spot. She didn't give me a choice. She didn't give me an option, but she told me we are going to the ramen spot. She put me on a ramen, and made me eat my ramen, and made me eat it there, and told me I better eat it when I get back to my hotel. So I thank you for Lynn giving me that new experience, and can't wait to connect with you and Rachel, Abby, and all my other good friends in the NYC. So thank you for tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, definitely. Love you all for tuning in and supporting and commenting and sharing. We'll see you next Friday. God bless.